During the quarantine years, everyone talks about boredom, about isolation, about cabin fever. But only a handful of people talk about the things we saw behind closed doors. The things we heard when the world had shut down. The things we felt when we were forced to stay inside, not knowing who or what was staying inside with us. These are 3 true disturbing quarantine stories, real encounters that happened when the world was quiet and something else decided to make noise. Story 1, The Shadow in My Apartment Hallway. My name is Adrian, and this happened during the 2020 lockdown when I was living alone in a small 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable, until quarantine pushed silence into every corner of it. I started noticing the shadow during the 3rd week. The hallway leading to my bedroom was narrow and always dim. The light bulb there died months before, and I never bothered replacing it. I didn't need it, or so I thought. I was sitting on the couch one night, playing a game on my phone, when I saw someone walk past the hallway from the corner of my eye. A tall figure, moving slowly. I froze. Nobody lived with me. Nobody had a key. I leaned forward, staring directly at the hallway. Nothing. Just empty darkness. I convinced myself it was quarantine paranoia, that my mind was exaggerating shadows. But that night, while trying to sleep, I heard it. Soft footsteps, slow, deliberate, walking from the living room toward the hallway. My breath got stuck in my throat. I texted my brother at 2:49 a.m. I think someone's in my apartment. He called immediately, but as soon as I picked up, the footsteps stopped. The silence felt heavier than the sound. I stayed awake the entire night. A few days later, around 11 p.m., I stood at the sink washing dishes. The kitchen counter had a reflective metal toaster next to me. In its surface, I saw something behind me. A figure, tall, still. Standing at the start of the hallway, I whipped around. Nothing. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked slowly toward the hallway, every step feeling like a mistake. Halfway in, my phone buzzed. I nearly screamed. It was my neighbor, Sarah. A message. Are you okay? I heard someone in your apartment again. That word, again, made my blood run cold. I asked her what she meant, and she replied, the past few nights. I heard footsteps from your place, like someone pacing. I told her I lived alone. She didn't reply for a whole minute. Then, Adrian, that didn't sound like one person. I didn't sleep that night either. About 2 weeks into the shadow sightings, I woke up at 4 a.m. to a soft knocking. But it wasn't on my door. It was coming from inside. Knock, knock, knock. 3 taps, slow and rhythmic, coming from the hallway wall. I grabbed my phone flashlight and walked out of my bedroom, breathing hard. The hallway was darker than usual. It felt like walking into a hole in the ground. As I approached the middle of the hallway, the same spot I always saw the figure, the knocking stopped. Silence. Then, from behind me, someone exhaled. I spun around so fast the flashlight shook in my hand. Nothing, but the air behind me was warm, like someone had just been standing there. At that moment, every instinct in me screamed to get out. I ran into my bedroom, slammed the door shut, and stayed awake until sunrise. The next morning, I stepped outside to get some air. Sarah's door opened almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. She stared at me with a pale, tense expression. I need to tell you something, she said. She explained that the tenant before me, a man in his mid-40s, died in my apartment during the early lockdown period. Not from the virus, but from a heart attack, alone in the hallway. Nobody found him for 3 days. He used to pace a lot, she added. I could always hear him walking, especially at night. My legs went weak. That night, I slept with every light on. 2 days later, I was packing to move out. I didn't care about breaking the rental contract. I needed to leave. While taking things from my bedroom to the living room, I walked through the hallway one last time, and right in the center of it, right where the previous tenant died, the air suddenly turned freezing cold. I felt it, a presence standing behind me, and then a voice, a whisper, barely audible, but real. Don't leave me alone again. I dropped everything and sprinted out of the apartment. The landlord let me break the lease without explanation. I didn't ask questions. But even now, during quiet nights, I sometimes feel like something is still following me. Something that hated quarantine a lot more than the rest of us. Story 2. The girl in the opposite apartment. This story happened in April 2021 during Malaysia's lockdown. A guy named Rahman shared it with me, and it still gives me chills. Rahman lived in a mid-rise apartment complex. His block faced another building across a narrow courtyard, only about 15 meters apart, close enough to see into each other's windows. Across from his unit was apartment 404, and that's where he started seeing her. One evening, while scrolling through TikTok, Rahman glanced out his window. Apartment 404 had their lights off, except for a dim spotlight pointed at the living room corner, and there she was, a girl with long hair, standing completely still, facing the wall, not moving, not shifting even slightly. He watched her for about 10 seconds, then laughed nervously. Probably just someone doing yoga or something, he told himself. But she didn't move, not once. When he checked again later, the window was closed. The apartment was completely dark. The next night, at around 10:30 p.m., he saw her again. Same spot, same corner, same posture. But this time, she turned her head, slowly, like her neck was stiff. She didn't look at him, just toward the room's doorway. Rahman felt uneasy, but again convinced himself it wasn't his business. That changed after the third night. On night 3, she was back, standing in the exact same spot. But this time, she was facing the window, facing him. Her eyes were open wide, not blinking, not shifting, just staring. Rahman slowly backed away from his own window, heart thudding. Something felt terribly wrong. He closed his curtains and tried to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., someone knocked on his door. 3 soft taps. Rahman froze. His building had strict quarantine rules. Nobody was supposed to visit anyone. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. He peeked through the peephole. No one was there. But what he saw instead made him stagger backward, across the courtyard, through the tiny crack in his curtains. Apartment 404's light was on again, and the girl was standing at her window, her head tilted unnaturally to one side, almost touching her shoulder, staring directly at his door, like she knew he was watching. Rahman didn't sleep. The next day, he called the building security guard and asked about apartment 404. The guard frowned and said, "Nobody lives there." Rahman froze. "What? But I saw." The guard shook his head. "The family moved out last year. The unit is empty." Rahman insisted. He even pointed at the window. The guard gave an annoyed sigh and took him to the building manager. Together, they opened apartment 404. The place was dusty, vacant, no furniture, no spotlight, no curtains. Nothing on the floors except footprints in the dust, footprints that led to the corner where the girl kept standing. The manager looked confused. Rahman, meanwhile, felt sick. He backed away slowly and said he wanted a different unit. As he walked out, he couldn't help looking at the window again. The glass had a handprint. A small, pale, smudged handprint, pressed from the inside. Story 3. The Quarantine Call Center. This story was submitted by a woman named Elise, who worked for a local health department call center during the peak of quarantine. But this wasn't a normal call center. Her team handled emergency check-ins, calling people placed under home quarantine to make sure they were alive. Yes, alive. One night, Elise tried reaching a woman named Mrs. Carter. She was in her late 50s, living alone, placed under quarantine after exposure. Elise called her twice. No answer. Protocol required calling a third time. On the third attempt, someone picked up, but they didn't speak. "Elise speaking," she said. "Mrs. Carter, can you confirm your name?" Silence, then soft breathing. Very slow, very subtle. Almost too quiet to detect. "Ma'am, are you all right?" More breathing, then a faint whisper. "Cold." Elise straightened up in her chair. "Did you say you're cold?" The whisper came again, more strained. "So, cold?" Then the call ended abruptly. Elise panicked and alerted her supervisor, who immediately contacted emergency services. When paramedics finally arrived, Elise waited anxiously for an update. An hour later, her supervisor returned with a pale face. "They found her," he said quietly. "Elise? Mrs. Carter has been dead for at least 8 hours." Elise's stomach dropped. "What? That can't be right." I just spoke to her. Her supervisor shook his head. That's impossible. She was lying in the living room. No phone near her. The phone is still on the charger. Elise insisted again. She heard breathing. She heard someone whispering. But the paramedics said the house was silent when they arrived. No one else lived there. No neighbors close enough to interfere. Elise tried to shake the incident off, but it stuck with her. 3 nights later, she was doing late-night check-ins again. Past midnight, her work phone rang. The ID flashed. Carter, L. Elise froze. Shaking, she answered. Hello? Again breathing. Then a whisper. Cold. Elise slammed the phone down and burst into tears. Her supervisor reviewed the call logs. There was no incoming call at that time. Her workstation phone didn't register anything. But Elise insisted. She said she could still hear the coldness of that whisper every time the office went silent. She requested a transfer the next day. The call center approved it immediately. These stories remind us of something we all tend to forget. During quarantine, the world became quieter, but not everything in it did. Some people were left alone for too long. Some spirits weren't ready to be forgotten, and some shadows waited for the silence to finally be heard. If you enjoyed this video and want more real horror content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Dark Vision. More terrifying stories coming soon. Stay safe and stay in the light.